Hello friends, this is Sanjeev and you're watching Data Ki Baat. Like every successful man, there is a woman behind that. Similarly, for the good quality data, right? There has to be, for the good, decision making, right? There has to be a good quality data. So if you really put this into the context of business, what happens is that for your business to make a right decision, you got to have a quality data around it, and you should be able to take the right decision. So it is directly proportional to the what kind of a data you have and whether the quality of data is right or not. So that's basically drive your business. So basically, if I have to put it in a quick summary, that your business is basically as good as the quality of your business data. So that's the topic of today for us, and we have a guest with us to help us with data quality insights. He has got a lot of experience in the data quality and data product area, and I'll welcome Clinton Jonas into the show today, and he will basically share about his experiences with data. He is a global product manager for Experian data quality, and he is with us today to share his insights on data. So Clinton, welcome to the show, and I would like you to just introduce a little bit about yourself, and then we'll take it from there.
Thanks for the introduction, Sanjeev. So yes, as mentioned, my name's Clinton Jones. I'm a Group Product Manager with Experian Data Quality. I'm based in our London offices, and I've been working with data for quite some time now. I think probably my first foray into working with data of any significance was back in the mid-90s. Working with financial data, because at that time I was in a finance-related role. And then over the years, I've worked in a number of different industry segments, healthcare, local government, manufacturing, food and beverage. I've worked for SAP as well, and I've also done some work for Microsoft. And yeah, it's great to be here today and have a chat with you about some of the things I've seen, some of the things I believe, and some of the perspectives I have effectively around business and business data quality.
Great. So when I, had a discussion with you and then requested you to be part of this show, I just posted a message and asking that, identify the person, right? I mean, so you have a strong belief that if you can torture the data enough, it will, accept the truth, or maybe it will guide you to the right insight, and then, insight or truth that you want out of it, right? So that's really a very compelling message. So just talk about that a little bit, because that was a something which I caught, and then I thought I'll ask you.
Yeah, it's a little bit of an inside joke, I guess, because anybody who works with data on a regular basis will probably have had an experience with pulling a whole lot of data together and getting surprising results, or then having to go and find more data, or in fact clean up their data. And statistically, I think there are plenty of studies that have demonstrated that data quality is not necessarily good at time of capture. It's not necessarily good after sitting in a system for a period of time. And most particularly, if we look at the data science community, a lot of the statistics that's coming out of that group suggest that they're probably spending 80% of their time fixing the data and preparing the data before they actually can start developing insights.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, I mean, there is a lot of talk around data quality, right? I mean, as we were discussing in our earlier calls, right? So there is a buzz around it. Everybody talks about it, and we have not left any stone unturned to really show that it is very important, right? I mean, if you really see those metaphors, I keep discussing about that because I like it, but in a way, I wanted to share that. I mean, we basically have not left any critical life resources, and where we have not compared data with, right? We talked about oil, we talked about water, oxygen, everything else, right? But what I see is that despite all those importance that we have given to data, the data quality still sucks. I mean, people struggle with that. So everybody talks about it. We know that it is important, but why is that not? There is a proper, results, or maybe a I mean, the improvement happening? Because still we are, continuously talking about, there are many experts talking about it. So what is your take on that? We understand it's important, right? But how? I mean, where is the gap?
Yeah, I think this is it's easy to dismiss organizations as not being particularly passionate about data quality, but I think one of the challenges is that the maturity of organizations varies. You can have very large organizations that have business units that have completely, or rather the complete absence of a data quality mindset.
Mhm.
And sometimes what this comes down to um, is is data recognized as an essential part of the organizational DNA? And I
Mhm.
think you can make a determination about that if you understand how the business uses the data. Um,
Yeah.
is data being used for insights and analytics? Is it being used simply to do transaction processing? Is it being used for tactical work or for strategic work? Um, the data that's been and gone, does the business really care about it?
Mhm.
Accountants are pretty good at taking data and shaping it, again, torture the data,
Mhm.
shaping the data in a way that is useful for meeting obligations such as shareholder value statements or preparation for tax calculations and things like that. So I think from an accounting perspective, the data is pretty good. I would love to say it's perfect, but I
Mhm.
think we all know from the financial scandals of years past that sometimes even financial data is not 100%. But I think if you ignore the manipulation of the data and you just look at the fundamentals of how data is used, that
Mhm.
then determines what the level of seriousness is within the business around getting data quality right. If you then peel that back and you go to where is that data coming from,
Right.
then you start to deconstruct what the methods are for capturing the data or harvesting the data and then working with it. So one of the observations that I have had over the years is that applications often are configured to capture data
Mhm.
for either self-service or through data entry methods. The
Mhm.
question is, are those capture methods basically catching the errors and potential errors up front, or is there always a capture fast and fix later mentality? And I think this is part of the problem.
Yep.
Most organizations have around a dozen systems of record.
Mhm.
Um, you know, you, uh, I think there's always an attempt to try and coalesce the systems and have fewer systems, but on average, there's about a dozen systems within every organization. And the reason I say that is because if you think about all of the kinds of systems you might have a timekeeping system, you might have a payroll system, you might have a um, accounting system, you might have a logistics system, you might have a sales and order processing system, you might have a marketing system. I've
Mhm.
just listed six, and I haven't even covered all the business processes yet.
Right. Yeah.
So, ERP tries to address all of those areas in one environment. But even if you use just one system to do that,
Mhm.
if you've got data sitting in spreadsheets or files or coming in from partners in the field,
Mhm.
those are no additional sources of data. What kind of
Mhm.
controls do you have around the quality of the data in those environments?
Right.
So, you know, look at what you're using the data for, and then work out where it's coming from. Because
Mhm.
working out where it comes from can help you actually understand whether there are potential problems.
Absolutely. So, what I mean, I am reiterating the fact that you mentioned a very good point here, right? So, catching things at source. I mean, that's a great idea, even to start thinking, right? I mean, but mostly, I mean, in my experience, what I have observed, and then I had one conversation with a small and medium enterprise where there is a less IT budget, and maybe a less focus on the IT, because obviously everybody wants to run business, and then IT kind of take a back seat. So there is not much resources and then tools as such, right? So they have been, seems to be struggling that, okay, yes, we want to capture, but those are all manual process. So what kind of a, approach that those organizations should probably take, because it is really good idea to stop things before it is entering the system, right? That's a great idea.
Oh,
But what happens?
absolutely. I mean, I was talking to a client the other day, and it transpired that they had moved off an old CRM system onto a new CRM system. Um, and for this particular organization, the CRM system is effectively their customer master. Um, and during the life cycle of the project, the data cleansing and data prep stage for migration had taken so long. They had so many difficulties getting business decisions on certain attributes that basically the budget for the migration was blown. And so the choice that they made was to go live because they needed to go live by a particular date. So they went live with their new CRM system, but they didn't have all the measures and controls around data capture. So even if they had the most beautiful, best-in-class migration from the legacy environment to the new environment with pristine data, the reality is by not capturing good data upfront as new records are created in that new target system, they're actually just compromising the integrity of the quality of the data that they have in their new system. So, day one, switching on to a new system, you may have beautiful data. You may have brilliant insights. You might have a great perspective on who your clients are. But then a week later, you've maybe captured a half a dozen or a dozen or more new records. And if those records were not controlled in any way, in the way they were captured, you could have missing data, you could have partial data, or you could just have downright wrong data. And I think this is kind of the problem that we observe, is that there's the best of intentions, but if you don't use the combination of people, process, and technology to kind of control the whole data quality perspective, then you're basically working with compromised data all the time.
Right. I mean, you touch very, close to heart. I mean, my I'm very high on this concept of people, process, and technology, because I believe that simplicity has all the answer, and it is not the something that I have built. It is long standing, right? Process, people and technology, right? So for the data quality perspective, my thought is like it is very. I mean, I'm very high on people, right? So what are your thoughts? I mean, I heard that you said it's a combination, but what still I believe that, right, ultimately you can bring a lot of good technology, you can probably have a process, but if the people who has to probably follow that are not using, then what is the point, right? So how do you?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, as you said, you can have the best technology in the world. You can have the most expensive solution. You can have
Yeah.
bleeding edge. You can have best in class, whatever it is. Use your favorite phrase of the day. But I think the challenge is that if you haven't educated your people, if they don't have ownership, if they're not being helped effectively with good policy, then what you land up with is a bunch of people who basically are just servicing their role,
Yeah.
pushing data in, pulling data out. They're not paying much attention to the quality of what they're producing. Nobody's watching them. Nothing is watching them, and they're potentially just compounding the problems. I mean, a simple example that I often use is, if I think about my mobile phone,
Mm-hmm.
I have a bunch of contacts in my phone,
Mm-hmm.
which maybe are tied to my SIM card. So if I switch phones, my contacts will go with my SIM card.
Right.
Now, most people have smartphones these days. And you may recall from the good old days of Nokia handsets, you could
Yeah.
actually store your contacts on your phone and on your SIM card.
Yeah.
And in fact, you could copy contacts between the two. But there was always a little bit of a risk because when you create a new contact on your phone, do you
Mhm.
create it in the phone or do you create it on the SIM card? So the technology is not really helping you there. It's helping you maybe with your migration to a new handset, but
Mhm.
actually it's potentially creating a problem for you. And you've actually got to be diligent when you create a new contact in making a decision as to whether you want it to be on the SIM or on the phone or both. Um, it now gets worse with smartphones because now you have a Google account, maybe, or you have a Yahoo account, or whatever it is. You may even be running a corporate connection to effectively the global address book.
Mhm.
And now you have all these other contacts in there.
Mhm.
And the question is, are those contacts all stored in a consistent, methodical way?
Mhm.
And are all the numbers, for example, formatted in the same way? Are the names all fully qualified? So do you have first name and last name, or do you just have first name? And what other attributes do you have in there? Because again, with smartphones, most of them actually have many more attributes because they come from a proper address book. Um,
And not to forget, you already talked about various silos, right? Because you're storing at the global address book or Yahoo or maybe
yeah,
Gmail and I mean, many places, and on the
yeah,
SIM itself, or the smart cell construct, right?
yeah. And if you look at a phone, you're really going to use contacts to do probably one or two things. You're
Mhm.
going to phone them, or you're going to SMS them, or you're going to email them.
Mhm.
So those three attributes are probably kind of your minimum data quality standard for a contact in your phone. Now, maybe you have a grandmother who doesn't have email. Okay, fine. So maybe she doesn't even have a mobile phone. Maybe she only has a home phone. So you're
Yeah.
not going to SMS her.
Mhm.
But when you put her phone number in, did you put it in as a mobile number or did you just put it in as a regular phone number?
Yeah.
Because those kinds of decisions are going to influence
Mhm.
what you can and cannot do with that contact. Um,
Mhm.
and so again, coming back to the business problem,
Right.
what am I going to do with this data? What is my intent? What is my purpose? If I've got contacts coming in from Facebook, coming in from Google, coming in from Yahoo, coming in from my SIM card, and I want to phone somebody, and I just happen to have had them in my phone for many years,
Mhm.
and they have a new mobile phone number, which maybe only appears in their Facebook profile.
Mhm.
Which number do I phone them on? So data quality is kind of embedded as a need in our daily life in that simple example. And when you take it then to the realm of business, if I want to run a marketing campaign, do I want to unnecessarily send emails to people I have in the system more than once? Probably
Yeah.
not.
True.
In fact, it gets worse if I want to send them a letter because the letter is actually going to cost me some real money. I'm going to have to do some printing. I'm going to have to
Yeah.
do some envelope filling. I'm going to have to do some addressing, and I'm going to have to buy postage. So, these are the kinds of things from a business perspective that are pressure points effectively for how you should be thinking about data and data quality.
Absolutely. I think that's a great insight there, right? I mean, you took the analogy of mobile phone early days and then latest. The problem remains same. In fact, it got a little bit more complex than what we had earlier, right? So, but you also brought a very good point, and I picked up that keyword over the rights, ownership, right? And
Yep.
I'll have some thoughts around that, right? So still today, I mean, I have been hearing this that there has to be a proper ownership, but still today, I mean, if really go and you must be really talking to the organization like anything, but there is lot about this ownership thing. We are still trying to understand that whose data is
Yeah.
it, whether it is IT or business. And in this process, or in this, I'll not call it a chaos, but in this uncertainty, right? What is getting ignored really badly is the data, right? So,
hmm
what are your thoughts and experiences around that? I mean, did you help somebody establish this fact very quickly so that they become more productive? I mean, in terms of
Yeah,
your,
I think if an organization has a data governance team or a data management organization, then they pretty well understand the importance and need of data, and there the role of the DMO and data stewards is often a hybrid role, where they're technically savvy, but they also understand the business need and the business situation around the data. But I think everybody accepts that the accountants own the accounting data, not IT. But the rest of the business data, is that well understood? And I say that the challenge there is that it's somewhat fragmented. So my observation again is that if you look at something as simple as the customer record, does this belong to finance? Does it belong to sales? Does it belong to marketing? Because if you think about those three different groups, they all have a vested interest in the customer data record. Accounting has a vested interest because they want to set credit levels. They want to be able to contact the person who's responsible for paying bills. They want to maybe know the tax ID of that customer if it's a B2B relationship. They will want to know where that person is located because they may need to charge them sales tax, and tax may be based on the location that they're in. And in fact, if you go a little further beyond the accounting function and you go to the audit function, auditors might want to make sure that you're selling to a legitimate party who is not on a watch list or somebody who should not be sold to. And so they will look at that customer record as well. Right. If you look at sales says, well, I care about whether I've sold to this person before. I care about whether this person has buying power. I care about understanding what industry that business is in. All the attributes effectively that describe my audience effectively for selling to. And then if you look to the marketing side, well, if I want to run a targeted marketing campaign and I want to target women, and I want to target women of a particular age group who live in a particular area, then I have to have all those attributes in my data as well. So no single one of those groups often owns the whole customer record. They may own slivers or segments of it. And this is where, master data governance programs and MDM type solutions are often very hard pressed to be implemented to actually layer in all the data around the customer record. But at the end of the day, that's still not an IT thing. The provisioning of the technology may be an IT thing, and the care and feeding of that system, again, may be an IT thing. But the reality is the business owns the data. The business is responsible for the data. And actually, IT's role is more that of a groundskeeper or a custodian of the technology or the repository that houses the data. They cannot be expected to know whether the data is fit for purpose or in fact be responsible for the maintenance of that data. They need to maintain the systems that hold that data, but they can't be responsible for making sure that the data is good and proper. But they can help with assisting the business in setting up rules and policies and configuration to support good data capture and good data assessment and good data remediation.
So why is that then there is a lot of discussion and thought and hesitation in really getting the approval or maybe a data program moving? Like when we really hear that, hey, maybe the data is not probably a top priority, and then it kind of takes a backseat when we really talk about, hey, let's roll up a data department as such, or data governance a program or a data quality program. Why is that there is a challenge if there is so much on stake, right, in terms of I know people should really own data because they have to do this marketing, sales, finance, all those good things that we are really just talked about, right? I mean, any
Yeah.
thought on that?
Oh, my favorite question is what is a bad record worth? If I mean, this current crisis that the world is going through at the moment, if you think about the most elderly of people,
Right.
they are contained in databases. Okay, and so the question is the contact information that I have for those people, is it good and proper? Um, because if I need to reach out to them and communicate something to them, maybe they're socially isolated. Do I actually have good validated means of getting hold of them? And often the answer is, well, I don't know. We can try. You spend a lot of effort working through the data that you have, only to find perhaps that 20-30% of it is bad or incomplete or just downright wrong.
Right.
Um, and that's expensive. So because you can't, or because a lot of businesses don't actually go through the effort of defining the value of a record, they struggle then to find the justification and rationale for spending money on big initiatives to actually improve the situation. And I think the challenge from my perspective there is that they don't even know how bad the data is. If nobody's responsible and nobody's accountable, and everybody just muddles along with the data that they have, and nobody tells IT to put some rules in place or put some controls in place in the technology to prevent bad data coming in, then basically you have people downstream right at the end of the line who are either picking up data in good faith and trying to do something with it, or who've already built their own silos of technical excellence to basically filter out what they know to be obviously bad data from what they perceive to be obviously good data. And that's a maturity thing, right? If I've not assessed my data, if I don't even know where all my data is coming from, I don't even know where all my data is housed, then how can I comment on what a good or a bad record is worth? And how can I determine what measures I need to put in place to actually make my data good or remediate my data? So I think the fundamental starting point is you need to take an assessment of your landscape, work out where your data is coming from, where it's housed, and make a determination as to where it's going to be used and what it's going to be used for. Is it tactical? Is it strategic? Is it a mixture of both? And then you need to start the analysis process. You need to effectively go through numerous cycles of assessment on those inventories of data that you have, which hopefully you've also stack ranked in terms of priority. And then once you've done that inventory and assessment, basically made a determination as to what that effectively is worth to your business. Because, there was something that was posted, I think about a year ago, where somebody basically said data is the new oil.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of debate about whether that's a good analogy or not. But I think that the key message that was trying to be communicated was that, a lot of businesses have a lot of data. Not all that data is of the same value, but the data that you do have that you feel is valuable, how valuable is it really? Because if the quality of it is poor, it can't really be that valuable. But some data in some worlds is better than no data. So, I think that's part of the challenge.
Yep. I think, in fact, I did one my last session around this topic because I had this question to people that, right? I mean, generally, I mean, when we see this kind of a metaphor and when we see this kind of a messages, which says that, data, I mean, obviously those quotes and messages, like you, for example, you see that if you torture the data enough, then it will basically help you get to the truth, which makes sense, right? But generally, people, right? I mean, we do not take action after that. We kind of get overwhelmed. We kind of just look at that message and then probably do nothing. Similarly, when we say right data is a new oil, but what is the next step? So I kind of drew an analogy from the oil and gas company, and I said that okay, maybe we can look at this, right? I mean, how do we extract the oil? How do we do that discovery, and then we do the processing and make that data or the oil of that quality, because that oil extraction and manufacturing and production process basically give you 10 kind of a different oil which you use for different purposes, right? Similarly, your data is one, and then you take it and process it for the need that you want it to be used for.
Yep.
So those kind of a discussion we had in my last show, and maybe you you might have recalled that.
Yeah, it's completely about fitness for purpose.
Yeah.
So some of the viewers may have some experience with DAMA, Dharma, who have a data quality assessment framework. And
Yeah.
if you look at that framework, it
Mhm.
has half a dozen or so attributes that don't necessarily all have the same level of importance,
Mhm.
but again, it depends on what the data is and what its purpose and intent is.
Mhm.
And the challenge, again, if I come back to my accountants, salespeople, and marketing resources,
Mhm.
it's easy if easy if you pass off the responsibility to some upstream or downstream group. If you say to them, "Oh, you're responsible for the data quality,"
Mhm.
then when you have a collection of people in a room, effectively, who are all supposed to be responsible for the same thing,
Mhm.
you have this diffusion or dispersion of responsibility, because
Right.
nobody's been explicitly assigned the task. And so this is particularly prevalent, of course, in organizations with a more immature data quality maturity model. So, that they don't have somebody who's designated as the final arbiter or decision maker
Mhm.
on the data quality. They don't have a hierarchy of responsibilities, or even, again, a final decision maker.
Mhm.
Um, they don't have a definition around the value of the data. They don't even have a prioritization of that data. And they certainly don't have a full inventory of all the data at their disposal. They kind of muddle through having IT responsible for some part of it, accounting responsible for their piece, sales responsible for their piece, marketing responsible for their piece. But if they really want to take this seriously and put a program in place, what they have to do is they have to define the shape and appropriateness, uh, or appropriate attributes that data needs to have to be fit for purpose. And everybody has a stake in it, and everybody needs to come to the table and apply their level of influence. Even the sales guy is influenced by the credit level that the accountants are going to ascribe to that account. Even the sales guys are interested in whether they can actually um, sell to that client, because maybe that client hasn't paid their bill. And the marketing guys certainly don't want to be um, marketing to, they're all measured on campaign effectiveness. So what would be the point in me doing an outreach campaign to an audience where a bunch of my audience recipients are never going to buy anything from me? They're not.
Mhm.
They probably have a rule set up in their mailbox to delete my email,
Mhm.
because I don't have an opt-in, opt-out option on the data that I have for them. Some of those really simple, fundamental things. If you've defined that as part of your schema for your business around what constitutes good or bad quality around customer data, for example, then that just makes transacting with the data so much more frictionless and so much easier. um, and it also imbibes confidence effectively, or imbues confidence effectively in the organization around the quality of the information that you're using to make strategic decisions effectively. And if your business is on a path of wanting to be acquired or doing mergers and acquisitions, remember that as part of that mergers and acquisitions type activity, there's going to be data coming in from another system or another dozen systems from a merger or from an acquisition. And again, if you don't have good policies and procedures in place, if you don't actually have a mindset around data quality, you could just be adding another pile of rubbish to the pile of rubbish you already have. And just as garbage in, garbage out is true for transaction processing, garbage in, garbage out is true pervasively across all the data that you have. And again, you need to do the assessment, and the assessment doesn't have to be a boil the ocean type approach. You can start small, and starting small sometimes really just means understanding how the data flows through your organization. Where does it come from? Where do we store it? What formats do we store it? And what do we use it for?
So essentially, where we are getting is that if you really want to create a great business case, what you should be doing, I mean, to the audience here, right? I mean, that was the topic for today, and then
Yeah.
for the topic as vast as data quality and data, obviously this 45 minutes is not enough, right?
No.
And we probably have touched a great, various topic, like you said, merger and acquisition. That itself is a huge topic in itself, that how do you manage
Absolutely. Yeah.
quality when this merger and acquisition type of things are happening, right? So like you just said, right, I'm just trying to reiterate the fact that where we are heading with this, right? So you got to know your data from your, from life cycle standpoint, that from where it is generating, how it is being, used, where it is being stored, who is using, how they are using, and you got to do those assessment, for those, and you got to be able to have those attribute measured and those metric defined, and then you can probably build up a case and say, you can go to the business and say that, hey, this data quality program or this data program is important, and we got to try for that buy-in process, because otherwise it will be basically not going to be a priority for anybody if you do not put the case in a way that there is a data itself speaking, right? I mean, when I say data self-speaking, right, you got to measure it, that okay, if you do this, what is the value that you're going
Yeah.
to get at your business, right?
And I think, in these days of austerity, and there are probably more to come in the next few months, often IT doesn't have the budget. So, in the old days when we were running mainframes or mini mainframes, and IT basically effectively defined the whole business process because everything was tied up in the system. They had a budget. They had a running budget. Back in the early 90s, I ran a number of different systems that were mini mainframe based, and we had a big chunk of change to run those systems, and if we didn't put the rules in the system, you had to do something manually to make sure that you didn't circumvent some of the controls effectively. But often you have to build a whole bunch of your own controls as well ahead of data capture. But IT often doesn't have the budget these days. IT's more focused on care and feeding of the infrastructure. So, it's network connectivity, it's security policies and procedures, it's, firewalling the system, making sure the web shop is up and running, making sure that the database has up-to-date statistics and has enough disk space. And in bigger organizations, the IT function may be outsourced because it actually makes more economic sense not to have IT help desk people inside the organization because it's not core to the business. Right. So where do you go to for the budget for these kinds of initiatives? You have to go to the business unit. And again, if the business unit responsibility is spread between 3 different groups, then how do you help, whether you're in an IT role, a data governance role, or just in the line of business? How do you guide the decision makers in working out what is a reasonable amount to spend, the timeline within which it needs to be spent, and what the value will be if you improve the data quality. And you can only get to that determination if you do the assessment, and if you work out what it's being used for, and what the value would be if it was wrong or bad or incomplete.
Absolutely. I think we are getting to a point where we are trying to convey, Clinton, that there will always be a scarcity of the budget. Maybe business definitely wants that to be right, but the budget may not be there. But still, we have to drive forward for the business, right? So things should continue. So that's where the thought of value and outcome based data management comes into my mind, right? I mean,
Yep.
you got to be able to find out and pick a small chunk, and as you said, right, do not boil the ocean. Basically, you pick a small chunk and try and show that, okay, if you correct this or if you handle this, what is the value that is going to give back to the business to be more efficient, more productive. And
Yep.
that's where the things start rolling, right? So value based and outcome based way of doing data management is something that is definitely a need of time. And one of my last show where I explained a 5-step process how to get the value-based, data management project rolling.
Mm.
I shared those insights there, and I can we can always talk about that in our upcoming sessions, right? So we are very close to our time today, Clinton. As I see, right? What I wanted to really ask you, apart from the conversation that we really wanted to have, and I think the users are getting value or would get value when they watch it. Um, I want to know some Clinton wisdom, right? Because you have been into this for long time, right? What is that couple of things that you absolutely follow? It's your guiding principle, right? That's we want to know, and we would definitely want user to know, right?
Yeah,
Your wisdom.
I think the first, it's probably the main one, is it doesn't really matter how long you've been working with data or with particular data sets. There will always be a perspective that will come from a meeting of minds of different people with different needs and objectives. And you may determine that actually some of the perspectives and predispositions that you have towards your data are not actually relevant or not actually pertinent or of importance to the next person. So I think, you always need to be familiar with your data, be familiar with what it is, where it is, and who's using it. But also be receptive to insights that you will get from sharing and collaborating with others on the data that you have, because often what you think is perfectly fit for purpose then turns out to need to be reshaped or reconsidered by the next person who needs to use it. The other thing I would say is data in a vacuum is pretty useless. You have to consider the data in the wider context. My data that I'm using, it may be perfectly suitable and perfectly appropriate for my particular purpose, but I should understand how other parts of the business can benefit from good quality data. And when we talked earlier about people, I think one of the observations is that if I don't really understand the context in which my data is used by others, because I choose not to share it with others or choose not to collaborate or don't care enough about it, then I'm losing out ultimately. Because as with all of these things, the collective is what actually brings the most value, and there may be a piece of data that another group has that is actually particularly useful for you, but if you don't have a dialogue with them, and if you don't understand what they have and how they use what you have, or how they might use what you have, then you basically are missing out on opportunities. And I think that's really what the data is the new oil kind of message probably should be, is
Absolutely.
data when shared and data of quality, when shared, actually has a compounding value. Um, and that's what we need to focus on, is that the data in and of itself, even once you've assessed it in isolation, it's of relatively little value.
That's really an aha moment for me. I mean, if you remember when I was, requesting you and then inviting you to the show, I said that, right, why do we do this? Because we really want to have some real experience coming out, some real insights coming out, which you might probably not get from the normal text or Google, right? Because
Yeah,
these are people that in the business or in the work for a long time, and they have some wisdoms to share. And then the only way to learn, Clinton, to me, is to really be able to talk to people,
yeah,
have some platform where we can collaborate together. So that's where this show comes into the picture, right? I mean, this where we really talk about real experience, real insights, and a raw appeals. There is no cut, there is no retake. It's basically raw, real experience that is
yeah.
coming out today, right? So thank you very much for this, experience sharing is what I would call. And as I keep saying, that it is conversation that where we are kind of sharing each other's, something that we kind of know, and then hope that people will be able to benefit from that. The next step that I'm thinking in my mind, Clinton, is to be able to really see, uh, how situations where you've been able to help clients or organization with your product development experiences, or maybe your tools and technology. In my last show, I talked about open source. I'm a big fan of open source, but
Yep.
I do want to have people see that, okay, what is Experian data quality looks like, right?
Sure.
So we can
Sure.
really pick those as a next step. And I am also interested that we can do some conversation around the M&A side of it, where we can see that what are the different challenges. So I think there are a lot that we can do, but 45 minutes is 45 minutes, and I think we have done. I think you have shared a phenomenal insights today with us. So I wanted to really thank you for joining
You're
us
welcome.
today, and I'm looking forward to further conversation that we can have and share some idea with the users, right?
For
So
sure.
thank you very much. And thank you everyone for watching this. And I hope you would have some questions and comments. So let us know, and then we will be able to answer you, or we'll have some, online show again that where we can discuss those in detail. So thanks for watching. This is Sanjeev, and you're watching Data Ki Baat.